I'm Holly, I'm a writer, and I have tried to make this video so many times and it's really difficult, so I'm gonna try and keep it short because otherwise it's just a bunch of nothing. But basically I'm gonna talk about Project Vampire, and I was gonna do the same kind of video that I did with Formation Lab where it's super long and detailed, but I can't do that for this book. So I'm gonna keep it to a few things. First of all, the inspiration for Project Vampire. I was having a conversation with a friend and I was like, what if there was like Romeo and Juliet but vampires, you know? And like Juliet was a vampire, Romeo was a human, and it was like enemies to lovers but in that sort of way. And that was the inspiration, and in a way that is what I'm doing, but it's also evolved. And so I have like a title that I really like, but I'm not sharing it because I don't know yet if it's actually an appropriate title, because it's very much, in my opinion, it's more of a literary title. Like if this book keeps going the way that I think it's going, it will fit. But if I try and make this book more of like a romance, like the kind that sort of sells really well nowadays and that is like expected of a romance, then it probably won't work as a title because it's not a very like romancy title, if you know what I mean. Like it's not a very standard title. But basically I have written this story, well, not all of it, but I'm back into it. I took a pause. I made a video talking about how I had paused querying to rewrite Formation Lab. I'm back querying that. I finished that rewrite and it's been a few days, and my average of like the writing that I've done so far for Project Vampire is about 1600 words a day. Don't hold me to that, but it's going well and I'm really enjoying it. And what I can say about it for certain is that it is a Romeo and Juliet inspired story. There are two families, right? You have the vampire family, who there are 10 vampires in this family, plus another vampire that isn't a blood relative but is like, they count him as family, you know? And then the familiar that they have. You then have the human family, and the human family is only 6 people including the dog, so 5 humans and a dog. And basically the father of the main character is a guy who lived in Nigeria. He was from Nigeria. His and his son's name are both like from Igbo. I looked up like specific names for the countries that these people are supposed to be from. It's a thing that I do, don't worry about it. But his, like, basically there was this thing called the purging of the vampires in Europe, where vampire hunters during like the Van Helsing era, they became hugely overpowerful towards the vampires, and so a bunch of vampires fled Europe for other places like America and Africa and Asia, for example. And so he lived in Nigeria where there were a bunch of vampires, like there was a vampire problem, right? And so because there was a vampire problem, he fled to Europe where the vampire problem was lesser to try and become a vampire hunter, to get strong enough that he could eventually go back and clear his homeland of these vampires that were terrorizing the people there, right? And then he met, while he was in Romania, this woman who he fell in love with, and they got married, they had a child, the main character, the male main character, and her family are also vampire hunters. Her parents were vampire hunters because they got attacked by vampires, and then she became one and she's really good at it. And so the main characters, they all live in the same sort of town in Romania in the 1970s. It is the early 1970s, it is 1972, it is the summer. The vibes that I went for were simultaneously like historically accurate, like this is a communist country in the early 70s, but also like the 70s, right? Like you've got this vampire, this main vampire woman, Sabine, who she loves like rock music. She loves like dressing up in the styles, and because she's a vampire she has a bit more freedom to do that because she's not restricted to the law that humans are restricted to, right? Like she's allowed to do basically whatever she wants because she has the ability to be like, why don't you go travel to this place and buy me this music that I want if it's not available in this country, you know? Like they don't have the same needs, they don't have the same restrictions. And so the vibes are very much like 70s, but in a way where it's like, you know, the truth of what it was like in Romania at the time isn't shied away from. The historical accuracy is something that I'm going for, not in like a I want to make it the focus, but in the sense that I want the experiences of the main character who is human, you know, I want him to have a harder time because he would have had a harder time. You know, he's a mixed race kid in a communist country in Eastern Europe. Like that, you know? So it's really, the reason why I kind of struggle to talk about it is because basically you have this vampire dynasty, right? And they have been hunted by this vampire hunter family, and they have, you know, they've fought back. And so you've got these two characters who meet. She tries to eat him, not obviously like eat him, but like she tries to kill him because she's a vampire and she wants to suck his blood. And he is a vampire hunter family guy, so he knows, he manages to get rid of her. But they like kind of use each other. That's like their relationship. They are real enemies to lovers. They don't like each other. They find each other attractive because I do think that there needs to be a base of attraction in order for the romance to actually make sense. So they do find each other attractive, but she like very much is just like, I want to kill you for a lot of it, and she's using him and he's using her, and that's how they get close. And I'm finally getting to the point where that's starting to become the case. A lot has happened, and this is the thing. The plot of this story is kind of evolving as I go, because my plan for this year was to write like 3 books. I've written 1 so far. I finished Project H, Halcyon, earlier this year. I also have finished Formation Lab twice. But basically I have 2 books that I want to finish this year, of which this is one of them, okay? Project Vampire is one of those books. And I think I'm gonna be finishing it in like September, right? Based off of the way that I'm going so far with the pace. So if we make that assumption, let's say that I don't look at it again until mid 2026, because I want to write this book. I want to write my next book, which the video is coming out about in 2 weeks time, and then I want to write, I think, the sequel to Formation Lab, which I don't know, it depends on the querying process. If I get an agent, obviously it might be worthwhile to write the sequel if that potentially gets picked up, but otherwise it might be worth focusing on Project Vampire to see if I can get that an agent instead. Yeah, I think it depends a lot on how things unravel. I would quite like to take a break from it for a few months and come back to it with a fresh mind and see which parts of it I like. Do I want it to be more romance? Do I want it to be more about like the families and their relationships with each other and the sort of like the interesting sort of dichotomy between the romance that's going on, but also the setting that it's in and the way that it's impacting everything, and the, you know, how like their relationship is very fun, but then the stuff that's happening around them is very serious, because there is a lot of stuff going on in this book so far, and I think it's really important that that stuff is there. So I'm just kind of, I'm exploring. I'm seeing where it takes me, and I don't know yet what it's actually going to be like. But what I can say is it is always going to be set in the early 70s. I really love that. The characters, I have them down. I'm pretty sure that that's how I want it to be. The setting specifically of Romania and like a village in Romania, well, it's a town, but like, you know, it's a pretty small place. That I think has a really good vibe. And I think that the bones of the story therefore are good. It's just like the structure is a bit of a mess right now, and it definitely isn't like a super coherent story. There are chapters where I'm like, maybe this should happen later, this thing that happens. But I want to get through it a first draft and then look back on it later and decide what stays, what goes, what needs to be developed more, because I don't know. I think realistically, it's either going to be a very romancy book, in which case the name that I have in mind currently will not fit and I'll need to come up with another name, which is sad because this name is like perfect to me. But I also then have the option of it being more of a literary story where the romance is more of like the sort of the you know, the catalysts of the events that happen. Like, it's their romance that causes the things that happen that are the focus of the story. Like, I could make it more of even just a literary romance where it does delve a bit deeper into the stuff around the main two characters. I don't know. I really don't know. But I'm looking into it. I'm figuring it out. And that's basically all that I can say, and it's why it's taking me so long to do this video and why I've had to do it so many times. Because like, I just don't know. And I don't know how to describe it, and I don't know how to describe it without sounding like I don't know what this story is. When I do, I don't know how to put it into a box yet, right? But I think I'm going to talk about it a bit more casually. And especially like when I finish the first draft, I will hopefully have an idea of what I want it to be then. Maybe I won't. Maybe I won't. But I'm gonna just kind of see how we go. And Formation Lab is still my priority in the way of like querying and whatnot. So we're gonna see how that goes before I make any super like heavy decisions on like what project I focus on, because I think there's a difference between writing a first draft of a story and then like writing a first draft, editing, rewriting, going through all of the stages of, you know, like I did all that with Formation Lab because that was the book I wanted to query. Do I want to query this book yet? I don't know. Do I want to query the next book that I'm going to write? I don't know. So I need to just figure it out, and I don't know how long that's going to take, but I will keep you updated as much as I can. I'm also going to do a querying update in like a month or two when obviously I actually know some stuff. I've not had any rejections yet, and must have been like a week, so it's not too bad because it means that nobody's saw the thing and been like no. But I don't know. I don't know. I basically don't know what my super solid plan is because I'm kind of going based off of like what's gonna make me happy. You know, I'm enjoying this story. I think I'm gonna really enjoy the book that I'm planning on writing next, which I've made the video about. I think that I do really want to get into the sequel to Formation Lab if that is a viable route to continue, because I especially now that I've rewritten it, I'm really like, I think I've enhanced what I had, right? And I think that the story that I've told, like, it's really in there. Like, I think about Natasha and Joel all the time, and so I want to write a sequel because the sequel is Natasha and Joel entirely, basically. Like, there's other stuff in there, but it is almost entirely about their relationship, their rivalry, and whatnot. And I'm really interested to properly get into that, and I think that that will be super fun. So yeah, basically I don't know how to describe Project Vampire, but I am enjoying writing it, and I do think that it has potential. It is the best first draft that I've ever written so far based on the quality of the writing, the characterization, which is I think pretty solid already. I'm about 30k in words wise. The next book that I'm going to be writing, which I'm currently planning, I've got a video about that coming out soon. It's a very long one. You will probably either really like that video or you'll be like, this is boring, but it's fine. I think the book itself has a lot of potential, especially if you like Project Vampire, the historical aspect. I do, as I said, I like historical settings. I think that they have a sort of coziness to them in the fact that they don't have like phones and social media and stuff. So I do tend towards that in stories where it isn't otherwise necessary for them to be in the future. I also think that the queering journey, like, it should in theory be a lot better now. So I will hopefully be able to update you on that soon. And otherwise, I don't think that there's much to report. So yeah, I'm gonna leave that there. If you do have any questions, because I feel like, again, this was like the least informative video that I could have done, just ask. Just ask. It's fine. I will try to answer questions. But yeah, basically that's Project Vampire. And thank you for watching. Bye.